If you're anything like me, you're always hunting for stories that make your skin crawl in the best way. That's why I have to tell you about Grimly. Every week, they dig into the unholy, the unsolved, and the deeply unsettling. From chilling true crime to eerie tales that blur the line between fact and folklore. The production is hauntingly good, the storytelling absolutely captivating. It's the kind of podcast that stays with you long after you finish listening. So if you're ready to explore the darker side of history and humanity, subscribe to Grimly wherever you get your podcasts. Just don't say I didn't warn you.
Research and recording of Canadian Creepies happens on the shared land and traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. A key treaty governing this territory is the Dish with One Spoon Agreement. This treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee people binds them to share and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, settlers, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We all share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, meaning we must take care of the land and the creatures we share it with.
Welcome, wanderers, to Journey Down the Crooked Path, a place where the stories are stranger, the shadows stretch longer, and the things that go bump in the night might just be listening. I'm Amanda Joy, your guide into the eerie, the forgotten, and the downright bizarre. Here, we step off the well-lit roads of Canadian creepies and venture into the murky corners of history, folklore, and the unexplained, where the whispers grow louder and the truth is never quite what it seems. So let's take a deep breath, watch your step, and whatever you do, don't look back. Once you start down the crooked path, you never know what might follow.
When you look at this part of North America on a map, the St. Lawrence sits right in the middle of the latitudes. It starts at Lake Ontario and runs northeast until it hits the Atlantic. The water moves through Ontario and Quebec and cuts along the line that separates Canada from New York State. And if you follow it long enough, you'll end up in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. It carries the outflow of the entire Great Lakes basin. Only the Mississippi moves more water on this continent, and by the time the St. Lawrence reaches the lower end, it spreads into an ossuary that scientists refer to as the largest one anywhere on the world. Indigenous nations were using this river long before any of the cities along it existed, and it stayed that way for many generations. But later, it became the route that created places like Montreal and Quebec City, because everything moved along this water and still does. The St. Lawrence Seaway runs through here with its locks and its canals, carrying ships from the ocean into the Great Lakes and back out again. The inland ports absolutely depend on it. This river is wide and fast and, well, impressive to say the least. And it's beautiful. But these things are also what makes it incredibly dangerous. The river carries the entire outflow of the Great Lakes, and that much water isn't exactly gentle. The currents change constantly and without warning. One area of the river can look calm, and then a few minutes over, you hit a deep channel where the current is completely the opposite. Undertows pop up in narrow sections and around the shipping locks, and they don't give anyone much time to react, so swimmers get caught in them every single year. And it's cold, even in the middle of summer. Falling into it isn't something that you can just bounce back from. Hypothermia can set in long before any help arrives. The water levels are changing all the time. Rocks that were exposed in the morning can be hidden by the afternoon. Same with sandbars. Shallow areas can appear where no one has expected them. Now, locals know the safe paths, but even they can get caught off guard sometimes. Winter, of course, makes everything even worse. Ice that looks solid isn't even. Some sections freeze unevenly because of the currents, and some stay open completely because of the shipping lanes or the Coast Guard icebreakers. But people still try to walk or snowmobile across it, and every year, there's a reminder as to why that's a bad idea. Now, These dangers are the obvious ones, the ones that you can point to on a map or explain with diagrams, charts, and old newspapers. But the river holds more than currents and cold water. For decades, there have been stories about creatures, beasts, monsters that live in these waters. The St. Lawrence River Valley, known to the Mohawks as the Kanirationea, meaning big waterway, has been a lived-in landscape for thousands of years. Archaeological work places Indigenous presence in the region at more than 9 millennia, long before the river looked the way that it does now. The entire valley was once covered by a large inland sea created by retreating glaciers. As the ice melted around 10,000 years ago, the water drained towards the Atlantic, leaving behind what scientists now call the Champlain Sea. When the sea retreated, the exposed land became the network of rivers, islands, and fertile soil. Kanirationea formed the spine of that system. Its tributaries cut through the region, and its banks offer fertile ground that was suitable for farming and settlement. Over the time, the ancestors of today's Mohawk and other Haudenosaunee nations established traplines, villages, trade routes, and archaeological fields along the water. According to Mohawk oral history specialist Dr. Michael Doxtator, Haudenosaunee was a substantial community, home to around 5,000 people. The island functioned as a major trade center. Algonquin groups would travel down the Ottawa River, and traders would come in from further up the St. Lawrence, and Haudenosaunee-speaking nations converged there. Canoes moved constantly along the waterways, carrying goods, news, and alliances. With organized life around the rivers, it's not surprising that the Mohawk stories often involved water. Even the creation story begins here. In this creation story, there is the Sky Woman who falls through an opening in the sky world and lands in endless waters. Animals dive beneath the surface to bring up soil, and land forms on the back of a giant turtle. That land grows into the continent, which is now widely referred to as Turtle Island. Along the great river systems of the continent, the First Nations describe a class of territorial water beings that attack anything entering their domain. Among the Mohawks on the St. Lawrence and the Omahas along the Missouri, these creatures were known as Wakandajee. They were regarded as dangerous enough that even experienced warriors avoided traveling the area alone. The creatures were said to strike without warning, overturning canoes and challenging anyone who crossed into their waters. According to descriptions, they were long and serpentine, covered in scales, with a thick tail and 4 legs shaped like those of a deer, complete with hooves. Their faces combined features of both the deer and the snake, and a set of large antlers rose from their heads. Now, despite having legs, they stayed in the water and lived in caves along the riverbanks. Problem is, they were actually rarely ever seen. Sightings were said to occur only when fog or mist covered the river, when the air blurred the line between water and land. Now, on clear days, that didn't mean that the creatures weren't any less active. They would still overturn canoes and drag occupants beneath the surface while remaining hidden. Now, according to the tradition, those who entered the river alone were considered to be the most at risk. Instead of just attacking these people, the creatures were said to challenge solitary warriors by hurling balls of water at them. If a ball landed inside the canoe, the warrior was expected to throw it back immediately. Failure to do so, or moving too slowly, meant that the ball would burst and kill the warrior, sending the body into the water to be taken by the creatures below. But if the warrior managed to return the ball in time, it would explode against the Wakandajee instead, injuring it. And this would mean that the traveler was worthy of crossing the river without any further interference. The west of the lower edge of Lake Ontario, the old Onondaga homestead stretches down towards the hills in northern Pennsylvania. In the late 1800s, an American anthropologist named Erman Ada Smith spent time with the families there and recorded a number of their traditional accounts. One of these stories describes an encounter between a hunter and the Thunderer. The account begins with the man being caught in a sudden thunderstorm while traveling through the woods. As the rain came down, he heard a voice calling to him from above, so he followed the sound until he found himself lifted high into the clouds, high above the treetops. Figures that were shaped like men stood around him. One of them appeared to be their leader. They directed the hunter to look down and asked whether he could see a great water serpent below. He said that he couldn't. So the leader touched the hunter's eyes, and the creature came into view, an enormous serpent moving through the depths beneath them. One of the sky beings was ordered to strike at the serpent, but the attempt failed. The task was then given to the hunter. So he drew back his bow, released an arrow, and killed the creature. When the work was done, the beings returned him to the place where he had first taken shelter, and by this time the storm had already passed. According to the tradition, this event marks the first time that a human ever encountered the Thunderer and his companions. From that moment, people understood that these beings were allies of humankind, protecting them from serpents, monsters, and other threats that move through the world. Beyond the territory of the Cayuga, the Seneca had their own accounts of a great horned water serpent. In the early 20th century, Arthur Caswell Parker, an American anthropologist of Seneca descent, recorded several of these. One of them combined two motifs that appear again and again across Indigenous North America: the hostility between the thunder beings and the horned serpents, similar to our previous story. And the serpents had habits of taking on human form to lure people into its underwater world. In Seneca tradition, the horned snake is described as a massive serpent that lives beneath the water. Antlers spread from its head, sometimes shaped like those of a deer, sometimes like the curved horns of a buffalo. It can take on the appearance of man, and in that form, it is known for drawing in young women towards him and convincing them to follow him below the surface. In other accounts, he appears as a rescuer to women who are stranded on enchanted islands. These creatures are not alone. There are others of its kind, including females who lure men underwater and attempt to change them by urging them to put on the garments that they keep in their lodge. The Thunderers despise the horned snake and try to strike him down before he can dive to safety.
You. Yeah, you. Still haunting the same old fast fashion? Time to dig up something better with Back from the Dead Goods, a Canadian small business where forgotten threads get a second life and sustainability meets spooky. This isn't just upcycled clothing, it's resurrected fashion with an eerie edge. Handpicked, reworked, and revived, every piece is as unique as a ghost story whispered at midnight. And because you're a part of the Canadian Creepies family, you get an exclusive deal. Use code Canadian Creepies at checkout for 10% off. Find them lurking on Instagram, Etsy, and Poshmark. Links are in the episode description. Give your wardrobe a second chance at life, if you dare. Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you. Let's take a moment during this break to talk about something that matters. Something that doesn't get to be background noise. The Anishinaabe-Moan word, Nikinagana, means we are all related, and we are. But relationship isn't just about words, it's about responsibility. Canadian author Naomi Klein once said, "It is not enough to say that we live on Indigenous land. We have to act as if we do." And one way to do that is by supporting Pay Your Rent, a grassroots mutual aid initiative that offers direct material support to Indigenous organizers across this land. It's not charity, it's rent. For those of us who aren't Indigenous to this place, it's a way to show up differently, to redistribute some of what's been taken. The Pay Your Rent Fund started as a one-time request for help in 2018 and grew into a nonprofit called Nikinagana. Your monthly or one-time donation can help provide food, hygiene supplies, housing support, and resources for Indigenous-led resistance and community care. So if you've ever said, "We're all related," ask yourself, are you being a good relative? Visit payyourrent.ca and find out more about how you can be part of something better. Now, back to this case.
One Seneca story tells of a young woman who found herself pursued by two suitors. One was Hino the Thunderer. The other was a handsome, mysterious stranger who wore very unique clothing. The stranger carried himself with confidence and charm, so the younger woman chose him. One night, she left with him and followed him to a lodge, hidden inside a cliffside cave beneath the water. The place was dim, and the walls were lined with garments unlike anything she had ever seen before. The stranger urged her to choose one that appeared to her. So this woman, she spends a long time examining the garments that hung along the walls. Each piece carried a strong, unpleasant smell, so she was hesitant to touch any of them. But one dress stood out to her. It was long with a trailing train and covered in flattened quill-like decorations. There was a hood attached to it, and from the hood rose a set of branching antlers. Now, she adored this dress, but she puts it back because this disgusting scent just clung to it. So she mentions her interest in this dress to her new husband, along with her reluctance to wear it. He approves of her choice, and he told her that he wanted her to put it on when he returned from his next hunting trip. The following day, he left the lodge, promising to be back soon. She's alone again, so she continues to look through the garments, and there are so many beautiful pieces like the one that she had admired earlier. As she studies them more closely, though, the truth becomes clear. These are no ordinary clothes. These are the clothing of the great serpents. The realization horrifies her, and she runs. But when she tries to leave through the front entrance, a wave forces her back inside, so she attempts to exit the rear, but the water drove her inside again. Gathering all the courage she could, she made one final attempt, running through the doorway and leaping upward. She broke through the surface of the water and found herself in open air. The sky was dark, and thunderclouds were gathering. A storm was moving in. Suddenly, the water behind her erupts. A massive serpent dove upward through the waves, forcing itself towards her. Its eyes burned with an intense glare, and a pair of horns rose from its head. She scrambled up towards the wet rocks in a panic, trying to gain height before it reached her. A flash of lightning lit the seed, and in that moment she recognized the creature's eyes. The same mark that she had once found strangely captivating was there. That serpent was her husband. So she tries to climb faster, but the creature closes the distance with a simple hiss. It coils around her, ready to pull her back into the water. But before it could strike, a violent crack of thunder split the air. A blinding flash followed, and the serpent collapsed, killed instantly by one of Hino's arrows. The Thunderer lifts her and carries her back to her father's lodge. And as he does, he explains that he's been searching for her, but she was hidden by the serpent's magic. He asks her whether or not she put on any of the garments hanging in the underwater lodge, because wearing one would have begun to change her into a serpent herself. She told him that she had resisted, and he was okay with this answer. He accepted it. Hino purifies her in a sweat lodge, and during the purification, she gives birth to 2 young snakes. When the ritual is completed, the Thunderer married her, and he also gave her people scales taken from the back of the horned serpent, telling them that the scales would protect them from similar creatures as long as they kept them in their medicine bundles. Later in Parker's work, he includes a story about a young woman whose beauty stirred some jealousy amongst her 3 sisters. One day they invite her to an island with the excuse of gathering huckleberries. While she focuses on picking the fruit, her sisters slip back into the canoe and push off, leaving her alone on the shore. When she realizes what happens, she sits on the beach and cries until she falls asleep. During the night, she woke to the sound of a low voice nearby. A group of beings stood in a circle, speaking amongst themselves about who would take on the task of helping her. One figure, tall and thin, with a clear, ringing voice, was chosen. She wakes up, and in the morning she hears someone calling her from the water. A large serpent waits just offshore. Its head is crowned with carved horns like those a buffalo would have. It told her that it had come to bring her back to the land and instructed her to sit on its head. It also tells her to bring some willow branches so she can strike its back if it's moving too slow. She climbs onto the creature, carrying the branches as directed. Its long body moves through the water, and she stays dry as it carries her towards home. So as they're traveling, the serpent explains that it belongs to a race of underwater beings that are hated by Hino. It said that scouts, described as small black clouds, might already be searching for it, and that a large storm would follow if they were found. But before it can finish explaining all this, a large dark cloud appears and starts speeding towards them. The wind picks up, and the serpent calls back to her, urging her to strike it harder with the willow branches, shouting that Hino had seen them and was driving his forces towards their path. This violent thunderstorm broke out over the lake as the woman and the horned serpent make their way towards shore. Lightning strikes closer and closer, and the creature is terrified. Unable to withstand the approaching bolts, it abandons her and plunges into the depths, leaving her all alone in the water. Now she manages to swim the remaining distance and reach land, where she is reunited with her husband. When the events become known, the three sisters who stranded her on the island are banished from the village. In the summer of 1995, the St. Lawrence River was running warm on the surface and cold underneath, the way it always does that time of year. A Mohawk fisherman heads out with his grandfather for a day on the water. Their community sits on the south shore of the river, just southwest of Montreal, in a place where families have lived since the 17th century. This village began as Kanawage, built by the Mohawk people who aligned with the French during the Beaver Wars. Today, it's known as the Kanawake First Nations Reserve, and the river is still a part of the daily life there. Now, on that July morning, the two men were getting ready to take out the old 20-foot open-top fishing boat. But before they push off, the fisherman's grandmother walks over and tells them to watch out for great snakes. Now, the two men, even though she's not joking, they just kind of brush it off and they keep preparing the boat anyways. Now that day, it was clear and bright with only a light breeze, and the water had been pretty much calm for that stretch of the river. They toiled against the current for a time before dropping anchor about 30 feet from shore at a spot known locally as Big Fence. After about 15 minutes of casting, something broke through the surface. At first glance, it looked like a log or maybe a tree that had been submerged, almost like a board was held underwater and then suddenly released. So the fisherman, he alerts his grandfather, and both of the men are focusing on the disturbance, watching the water settle around the object that had forced its way up from below. The water begins to settle, and the shape beneath becomes clear. This is not a log. About 100 feet from the boat and 30 feet from the shore, a large snake-like head rose 8 to 10 feet out of the water. The creature's skin was dark brown with black blotches, resembling a waterlogged tree. Its body was as thick as a telephone pole. The head was distinctly serpentine, with 2 large black eyes and a pair of short horned, like projectors on top. Now, at first, the creature kind of appears disoriented. It turns its head from side to side as if it's trying to get its bearings. Then it extended a long purple forked tongue, roughly 5 feet in length. When it noticed the boat, it lowers itself until only the head, nostrils, and horn remained above the surface, moving like a periscope as it swam directly towards them. The two men, they tried to reel in their lines and pull up anchor as quickly as possible. The creature closed the distance to about 20 feet, then rose again and extended its tongue for a second time. The fisherman told his grandfather that it looked as though the creature intended to climb aboard the boat. Its eyes remained fixed on them the entire time. The anchor finally comes free and they make their escape. The fisherman never saw the full length of the creature, but based on the size of the head and the portion of the neck that was visible above the water, he estimated it to be about 50 to 65 feet long. This story has been told by one Brent McGregor, who is a member of the Kanawake community. The local Kanawake tradition says that the great water snake of the St. Lawrence is described as a being that nests close to the edge of the forest or the swamp, laying its eggs on land rather than in the river. It is believed to travel overground only when needed, usually at night, when it's harder to notice. Now, the smaller baby ones, they're the ones that move the most, slipping across the dark while they're still easy to overlook. Newly hatched young are described as having a bright metallic blue color that catches the sun when they're exposed to it. The creature is said to influence the weather, being able to stir up storms and rough water. It is regarded as an ancient, powerful being with a presence that extends beyond the physical world. According to accounts, it can enter a person's dream. After the encounter on the river, the fisherman began experiencing reoccurring dreams of the creature, vivid enough that he eventually sought guidance from a local medicine man. He was told that once someone sees the serpent becomes aware of them in return, and from that point on, it may move through their dreams, searching for a way to draw them towards its domain beneath the water. Across these territories, the river carried trade, travel, and entire communities, but it also carried things that were not human, and that part of the record has never been erased. Whether the sightings came from fog, deep water, or a clear summer afternoon, they are treated as real encounters. The old stories and the modern ones line up more closely than people expect. Thanks for joining me on this eerie journey through Canada's darker corners. If you love this episode of Canadian Creepies, be sure to follow Valerie on Instagram and TikTok at Canadian Creepies. She's the one behind the socials, sharing behind-the-scenes stories, creepy photos, and sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. And if you're craving even more haunted history and twisted folklore, be sure to check out my other podcast, Down the Crooked Path. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok for even more haunted history, mythical madness, and spine-tingling storytelling. Come say hi, share your own creepy encounters, and help us keep the weird alive. Until next time, stay curious and stay creepy.